Hi, and welcome to the channel. I'm Marco from Hellforge Studio, and today we're going to talk about Attic's newly released single Darkest Rites, taken from the upcoming album Return of the Witchfinder. I was in charge of production, so I want to take you through each individual instrument and take a look at what we've done here. Okay, let's dive right in. Let's start with the drums, I'd suggest. Well, let's listen to the full mix first. That should be enough for now. Let's dive into the drums. I'm gonna solo drums here, and we can have a listen to how the drums sound on their own, and then we can figure out how they translate into the mix and what we've actually done here. Yeah, let's jump to a faster part. Alright, so first thing that I want to talk about is, it's as highlighted, the kick drum. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of pain involved getting the kick drum to actually trigger properly. Not meaning triggering and sampling, there are samples involved as you can see, but meaning in opening the gate. The drummer JP has a really dynamic playstyle, and the premise of the recording was we want to keep the natural dynamics of his playing without sounding weak, without sounding stale, and also without getting too robotic, you know? So we don't want to fix the dynamics, we want to retain them. In order to do that, as you can see in the chorus, there is very fast double bass, and we have two kick drum mics. And as you can see, there's a lot of automation going on for the trigger module. I'll open it and put it to the side so you can see what's happening there. And I think, if I remember correctly, this is also a first edit already printed into the recording. So it was even more work to get it to work. But this is the final automation. So let's have a look. Alright, kudos to JP, really tight from the timing, it's great. But as you can tell, it loses a lot of attack, a lot of directness, a lot of strength when we're getting into the double bass, which is perfectly fine. This is almost the case with any drummer, and it's just something you have to work with. So let's see what I did here. Yeah, I think I can tell already there's a lot of automation going on. Yeah, as you can see. Here you can actually have a listen. I'll just solo the kick for now. Yeah. So, what did I do? I lessened actually the highs, so it's not getting too clicky. And got some low mids in there and lessened also the lows. Let's look at the EQ, what I actually did. Yeah, that's pretty typical. You know, let's see what it usually looks like. Yeah, there's a lot of high end and a little bit less low mids in the normal rhythm. And then in the double bass, we have more low mids and more high mids, less lows. And that way it can actually cut through the mix. So let's see. Now, just to see what the automation does, I'll put the automation to off. It's half as bad as I thought it would be, but you can definitely tell that it's more muddy, it's more like a low-end rumble from the double bass and not so much accentuated click. And what's happening in modern production is usually that we're gonna put up the trigger tracks, so you can actually hear the bass drum loud and clearly, and there's like no dynamic change from the normal beat to the double bass beat. And we decided against that. We could actually just have some fun here and do that right now. So I'm gonna put the kick higher here. That's the trigger track. We could also put the normal kick higher as well, but there's a problem of bleed and the crossover spill from the snare especially, because it's such a low volume. But yeah, maybe it sounds better like this. Let's see that we do this on the second kick as well. I'm not sure what I did on the first track, but something like this. Yeah, so that way it's way more pronounced, it's way more upfront and has less of the original dynamics, which sounds fine as well. To be fair, now that I listen to it back now, I do prefer it this way. And I don't know, let me know what you think. I think the band is happy with the result. And for once, I actually enjoy that there's dynamics in the final mix, even though we still wanted a not so old school and still very professional sounding record. So yeah. That's interesting. Also, if you were wondering, the trigger sounds are first a trigger that sounds exactly the same, not even sounding exactly the same, it is the same. It's the sample files from the session itself. That's this track. We can have a listen there. Yeah, it's just processed very differently. Let's put off the processing. Yeah, so that's almost exactly the same sound. You know, during the session, depending on when we recorded, we had to adjust tunings and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different, but the basic sound is the same. And then obviously I put a lot of distortion on the sample. I do like to do that to actually lower the fake sound, the roboticness of the gunshot effect of the sampling, of the triggering. So I actually cut off the heads with a lot of distortion, so even though we use the trigger, it won't sound like this triggered machinery-like typewriter thing. And then we have the kick trigger 2. You can see it's in stereo. This is my room trigger. I always like to have a room sample, and in the intro you were able to hear that really, really clear. I mean, in the mix, it gets drowned, but that's actually on purpose. So you have this like depth control of how much you want to hear of the actual room sound or of the triggered room sound, and so the mix doesn't get overbeared by it. Let's have a listen to the mix again. Now that you know there's room in there, you can actually really discerner in the mix. You know, there's the kick, which is really tight and direct, but there's also this low end rumble underneath that has a lot of sustain to it. You know, doom. And that makes the sound of the kick more natural, even though we gated the kick drum very heavily to make it sound tight. Okay, moving on to the snare. I actually can't really tell that much about the snare, but JP is really great with his hands as a drummer. So I just wanted to show how little of a sample we actually used. So yeah, let's have a listen to the drum mix and then the snare and solo. Okay, and now let's mute the trigger. Yeah, the trigger is only adding a bit of low end, you know, to make the snare more fat, but also to make it more consistent. So some weaker hits on the snare. As you can see, there is still a lot of dynamic in the recording, especially here when he's going a little faster, I think. Yeah, so you see, you can see we don't want to lose these dynamics. And then there's also a little bit of room. Again, same philosophy as with the kick drum. We have our standard trigger sample, which is from the same session. It's basically the same sound. We can listen to it without processing again. Yeah, a lot of lower. Basically the same sound, but also processed more heavily because there's no bleed from the cymbals or anything. And then we get the blend of the two, and you can hear that there's still a lot of natural dynamics. Let's actually go to a drum fill. Yeah. And also, if you were wondering, I have the snare attack track here, which is not a sample. As you can see, there's no tracking going on, which is actually just a copy of the first track and then processed more heavily. Which sounds kind of like shit, but that's on purpose as well. As I had it with the kick drum, with the distortion on the sample, I do add a lot of distortion. Actually, first a transient designer, where I pronounce the attack really, really heavily, and also in a way that shapes the drum tone. And then I even it out with a lot of distortion. So we have a really consistent snare attack. We can listen to the, oh no, let's listen to the normal snare top track and then adding the snare attack. Yeah, so that's basically the snare. Now I want to listen to the full drum mix and just muting the snare sample, so you can see there's really not a lot of sample going on. It's almost all the natural dynamics from JP, and that's what we were shooting for with the recording, with the production. So we have a polished sound, but honest and real. So, with samples, and without samples. Yeah, hopefully you agree. If not, that's fine as well. I think we achieved a really nice natural snare sound here and accommodated JP's playing almost perfectly. Also, there's a lot of automation, or not that much automation, but mostly on the highs and the EQ. and then also on the reverb send. I think that's happening in the chorus, yeah. You know, there's always this big snare at the end, and it needs more reverb, of course. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the toms. Also a sample in there, same philosophy again. Samples from the session, same sound, different processing. Again, more distortion, more consistent sound, but without getting robotic. I think this is quite interesting because it's a very busy drum part with a lot of cymbals and all the toms being played one after another. So what I think we will hear is spill, so different kinds of loudness of the bleed from the cymbals, but then as well different velocity from the playing of JP. So some toms sound more huge than others. And well, let me correct myself. I think we will not hear that because I accommodated for it in the automation with EQ, loudness, and yeah, I think sometimes even the level of the sample. Not in this. Oh, yeah. There's one example, 2 examples. Yeah, but let's see. Okay, there's still a lot of differences in there, but you can't forget overheads, rooms play a huge role in the sound of the toms. But I wanted to show you the toms without automation in this part, and I think we will hear a quite heavy difference. Yeah, almost each and every tom fill has this gap with a cymbal in it, which is of course unavoidable because that's what JP is playing here. Yeah, so that's actually by design. So what did I do to make it happen? A lot of EQ automation, as you can see. Mostly EQ automation for the highs and high mids, so we can actually attenuate the bleed, but also in the lower mids and especially in the lows for the bigger toms, so they don't sound weak in comparison to the high toms. Now, how can this happen? Usually, it's the drummer, you know, playing from up there to down there. That's a lot of physical space to come across, so you lose impact along the way. And especially in a busy part like this, with a high tempo, of course you will lose velocity, you will lose impact, but you don't want the listener to actually hear that, because instead of building up impact, instead of building up excitement, you would lose it instead. So let's have a listen with it in the full mix. Now let's have a listen without automation, and let's see if that makes things better or worse. Hopefully worse. Yeah, okay, so 2 obvious things. Well, the second tom is way louder than everything else. And especially the third and fourth tom have way lower impact, way less lows, and feel a lot weaker and smaller compared to the high toms, even though those are the ones that are smaller. And then the other part is there's all the spill to be heard. Each and every cymbal kind of loses its actual spaciousness because it's also coming from the tom mics. And yeah, that's awful, and that destroys immersion, I think. But I promised we were looking at the overheads as well and the room tracks, and maybe even the worst, which is called the dirt mic. I think the worst is not as important in this mix as I usually like to use it. But let's have a listen. So this is the worst. as you can hear, there's a lot of snap from the snare, a lot of attack, a lot of sustain also. So it's a really like a really dirty mic, just as the name suggests, which brings a lot of character. And it's louder as I thought it would have been. What I did in the processing, I bypassed it for a second, is just heavy compression to bring out all the room sound in the dirt mic. And with this, as we had 2 kick drums, as you saw earlier, we placed the Wurst right between both bass drums in front of a snare underneath the toms. And therefore we have great room sound, or, well, not room, great sustained sound for each and every individual drum, except for the low tom, for the floor toms. But yeah, that's just due to the distance to the bass drums, you know. And then let's listen to the overheads, and I will toggle on and off the room tracks, because for me, those tracks always have to work together. And in my studio, the room tracks tend to sound just like bigger overheads because I have a very dry room and a very distinct overhead sound and room track sound, because there's not a lot of sustain, not a lot of reflections going on. We have this very dry and accurate representation of the drum kit. Now the room tracks. Listen that the whole kit is very snappy and direct in the overheads, but almost sounding a bit thin. And then that's the point where the room tracks come in. Yeah, with the room tracks, the overheads and rooms together create a really nice spaciousness, snappiness, so and direct attack, especially on the snare and toms. Let's actually have a listen on the toms, the same part we had before, but at the same time has this earthy, grounded type of low mid and bass kind of feel. And also notice I don't do what many modern mixes do, like high passing all the low end out of the tracks. I actually make them work for me. So let's have a listen to the toms, where especially low end is important. Yeah, and I think I will toggle on and off the whole drum mix as well. So overheads and rooms solo. Full mix. What you can hear in the overheads and room tracks is not something completely different. Of course, we have lots and lots more of attack and smack and direct and powerful feeling from the close mics, but the overall sound is still the natural and same kind of sound. That's enough of the drums. What you could see here on the overheads was a lot of cymbal and hi-hat automation. So actually each and every cymbal underneath this verse especially needed the correct volume. So it has the perfect impact underneath the vocals even. Okay, and then you can see there's another verse where I did the same. Also on the right, all the time the right, every time the right is played, I'm trying to accentuate that and make it audible. Moving on to, yeah, there's lots of overdubbed tracks and stuff like that, you know, like the belts in the intro, but I won't talk about that, and also lots of automation. But I think we can skip this part at this point. Maybe I'll do a video later where I really dive into the automation. But right now I want to go onto the bass, and the bass is, well, I don't want to sound rude, but it's very basic, very simple phoetic. So we don't have this modern, very aggressive and cut through the mix kind of bass guitar. we have a very round and full and fixed sounding bass, which is just the root note most of the time, and giving the full mix, well, its fullness. So let's have a listen to the bass sound. Let's listen to the roll of the bass in the full mix, and I will mute the bass and bring it back in. So no bass right now. And bass back in. Makes a huge difference, even though the bass is actually really buried in the mix and just giving the foundation to the tracks. Except for a few parts, which I actually just played when we started. There's the small fill-in, where we actually did some important automation so the bass can come out through the mix just in these parts, just in certain parts where the bass is playing something important and something important for the melody. So let's see what we did here. Yeah, well, a lot of EQ automation, some volume automation. Let me see, I think there's... Yeah, there's a lot of there's lots of highs, of course, so it actually can compete with the guitars, but without getting too harsh and too percussive. Yeah, and then on this EQ, even more highs, even more mids. I also noticed some low mids. I think that's happened in the note definition. Let's listen without automation, and then we can tell. Another time with. Yeah, that really brings up the note so we can hear the melody of the bass. And then I think there's even a small solo part for the bass in the end. And yeah, I think this is the part. And there we have a little bit more elaborate automation going on, volume automation, and also note-dependent EQ automation. Let me show you what I mean. So this is really tricky because there's vocals underneath, and right after it, there starts a lead guitar playing this like lead solo outro kind of thing. And so bass, even though there's a lot of automation going on, it still gets kind of buried. Yeah. So in the full mix, I don't get the feeling that the sound of the bass changes. It actually makes it sound more coherent, you know. So in the full mix, the bass sounds more stabilized, even though it's the opposite. Yeah, especially on those last three notes with the slide. It gets really obnoxious when you play it in solo, but in the full mix, that's actually what's needed to be heard. Right underneath the vocal, and I think there's even vocal automation accommodating for the bass, but I don't want to talk shit here. Yeah, I think, no, this is actually done because it moves on for the lead guitar and the vocal. Sorry for that, but maybe we can find some automation in the leads. Let me see. No. Maybe on the rhythms, because it's something I tend to do. and I think it would be interesting to see. Oh yeah. Okay, as you can see, as soon as a bass gets up on the register, the rhythm guitars get, well, not muted, but mellower and pushed more into the background, and also thinner, so the low end of the bass can come out. Let's have a listen solo on the guitars. Yeah. Also, another two things that I will talk about later when we come to the guitars, but that's very interesting, I think. Every time the bass needs to come forward, everything else kind of needs to step back. That's like, yeah, well, that's a philosophy with the full mix almost every time. So you actually leave space for the instrument that needs to shine. And that's just as important as making the instrument shine itself. Moving on to the guitars, I want to start here where we stopped, because that's one thing I do really like to do when we have these big, spacious black metal kind of vibes with big chords being played very fast. To get a more distinct sound, I really like to add flanger in this case. I thought it was a chorus, but yeah, chorus, flanger, phaser, it's kind of the same. No flanger. Then comes the full verse, no flanger, it's just straight up guitars. And then, underneath the solo, it gets really atmospheric. Yeah. Nice flanger, just making the rhythm guitars spread out to the sides more and leaving space for the for the leads, sorry, but without taking the attention from the lead guitar. And I think that's very important, especially in this kind of spacious parts and in very busy parts, having high tempo, spacious chords, and also a lot of, well, noise going on. High distortion means a lot of noise. Okay, and then one general thing about the guitars I wanted to talk about is we have two guitar players, obviously, but they also have a very, very different and very distinct guitar playing from one another. To show, I think the first guitar here, the guitar on the left side, is Max, and he has a very aggressive, very direct, and very tight rhythm guitar playing. Right? You can hear the pick attack, it's really strong and very, very defined sound. And then we have on the right side, we have Cutter, and I don't want to offend him. Please don't take this the wrong way. He has a more open, more sloppy kind of feeling. And I really mean this in the most positive way, which is a lot of work in the studio because, well, you have to see that everything is tight. But, and that's what I want to show you, it gives a great dynamic feeling, especially when he's playing chords. So in the chorus, you can see, especially on the DI track down here and up here for Max, Max has this really strong transients and then it's falling off quite quickly. And Kata has this more mellow approach, but when he really digs in, like in the part I will show you right now, it develops this great feeling of dynamics. You know, it's getting louder once he's getting more excited. And let me show you. And especially in this part, there's also a lot of automation going on to support the impact of the music. But the rhythm guitars really help, and that's also something I wanted to push during production. So we have these overdub guitars, which play the same thing just another time. And together, that creates a real nice sense of dynamics and impact, and, well, this overwhelming break right in the middle of the chorus. think that's great, and I think this kind of playing from these two players actually really nicely accommodating each other and making the full mix more interesting. You know, that's something you can hear a lot on older albums, not so much on modern albums. And let me tell you why. Because on older records, it was like, well, it was a question of honor almost, that each player would play his own parts, and you would give space to each and every player for a unique playing style. I always like to talk about Judas Priest here, but I spare you that. But there you can really listen that each guitar player plays something different. I mean, that's on purpose, of course, but they also have a really distinct and unique kind of playing style for each individual rhythm guitar track. But moving on, the same thing goes for the lead guitar parts as well. So let's move on to the lead guitar. Both players have their individual lead guitar tracks as well as their individual solos. So if I remember correctly, the part a player wrote for the album is also played by the player. You don't have to do that, but I like that, and also supports the same thing I said earlier about the rhythm guitars, that each player has a distinct sound, and so every lead part feels a little bit different. And also, which I forgot earlier, on modern records you always kind of pick the best player and make him play the full record, except for the solos, of course, and sometimes for leads, but mostly the solos. But if the player is good enough, I really like to make it work. You know, obviously for this tight staccato rhythm, Max's playing is better. No question asked. And also, Katte's playing is better for the dynamic parts. No question asked. But that's not really the feeling of the band playing on stage. And I'm not saying that the band has to sound as they sound on stage. That actually would be garbage, I think. On stage sound is very rarely actually sounding good. But in recording, we want to create the feeling of a band playing live. You know, the impact and the emotion and, well, the feeling and the experience of the audience being right in front of the band. And I think to create this kind of illusion, it's really important to keep this small, well, not mistakes, but, well, idiosyncrasies, I think we should call it. Keep them in the recording and make it sound more real, even though it's a recording and of course it's manufactured. Okay, so looking at the lead guitar, I think we just take a look at the solos because I think they're really immaculate, and I especially love Max's lead playing on this song, but Katte has also this kind of neoclassical kind of style, and we can see what their different guitar playing makes of the sound, because it's actually the same setup on both guitars, but they sound completely different. Well, not completely, but have a listen. Okay, I hope you all could hear it, but that's really interesting to me as well. Even what they are playing, so even the writing of the solos is, and I think it's more of on an instinctual kind of level, they play into their strengths. You see, Max is playing a lot of staccato kind of style. Oh, actually, that's not the part that I wanted to show. Yeah. You know, he's really digging in, using palm mutes even in the solos, and making things stand out and had this distinct kind of note, well, precision even. And then there's Cutter. He's playing way more legato and way more mellower. So you have this warmer kind of lead tone, because I think that is the biggest distinction between the two sounds. We have a more warm and mellow lead sound for Cutter, and a more aggressive yet thin kind of sound for Max. And I think they play greatly into each other, especially at the intersections. But have a listen to Cutter as well. And I wanted to show you this legato run. Yeah, this one. No, which is, on the one hand, very nicely played, really smooth, and every note flows into each other. But at the same time, with a more aggressive kind of sound, it would work as well. But we don't need this kind of aggressive, sound for this part. And I even think the mellow kind of sound from Cutter, and it's really just his playing. It's exactly the same sound and almost the same processing. This works better, I think. This makes the legato run even smoother and even more, like ear candy, I would say. Let's have a listen to the full mix again. And also on the bendings, he leaves a lot of time until he reaches the perfect note. But with the interplay of the delay and the reverb on it, it never sounds out of tune. It's just reaching for the right note and then actually reaching it. And I think that's an amazing part of this solo. And yeah, last thing I wanted to show about the lead guitar is the intersection. You know, Cutter leaving the note standing, and there's obviously loudness automation, and I think even EQ automation. Yeah, so there's EQ automation to make room for Max's guitar when his solo starts. Here, Cutter's guitar almost disappears on the right ear, but it's still there. And so you get the harmony from his note and the melody in proportion to the melody of Max's playing. Once again. Yeah. And what I really love about this, and that he's letting the note ring really long and then doing a slow fade out, is it smooths the listener into the more harsher, more thinner, yet aggressive lead guitar sound of Max. And I want to play this in solo once more, so you can actually hear how, with Cutter's harmony note underneath, it still sounds kind of smooth. And once the note is faded, it gets really, really strong and aggressive. Let's see. Sorry. And I think there's also less reverb after that. Yeah, automated reverb and delay on this part. So the contrast gets even stronger. Let's have a listen to the full mix. Lots of delay and reverb. Much drier sound. Of course, except for single notes that need more delay, like this bending here. And so it gets more spacious, more big. Moving on to, I think, the most interesting part, the vocals. Or most unique part about the band, the vocals. Some would say it's a King Diamond rip-off, or homage, or tribute. I think he still has his very own kind of vibe, and it really needed an own kind of, or unique kind of approach in production as well. And I want to shed a small light on the whole thing. But first, of course, I forgot something, because it's just complementary. There's a small choir synth, I think in the chorus, and yeah, only in the chorus, which just gives a bit of depth. I will mute the vocal for a while, so I think then we can actually hear the synthesizer. But even then, I think the synthesizer is just in the background, just giving some depth, some width. And well, it supports the dynamics of the guitar as well, I think. Yeah, if you don't know there's this kind of organ kind of sound, it almost disappears to the ear. But if you've listened to it, then it's always there. And I really love this kind of effect. Something that, as a listener, you can explore. You won't notice on the first listen, on the second, on the third, but maybe on the 10th, 15th, or 20th listen. And that's a philosophy of mine that I really want to engage the listener into long-term listening. So there's always something to explore, to find something unique about the track, even if it's just this, well, negligible, small kind of detail that doesn't really make a difference. Now, to the vocals. I think the most important part is the sound in and of itself. Therefore, I want to play the verse and the chorus and talk a little bit about it. You know, it's a really treble-driven, high-mid-driven vocal sound, really dry, but not in terms of effects, because there's lots and lots of reverb and delay on it. I will show you in a minute. But in terms of aggressiveness, and the singer calls it krispeln, which is a word that doesn't really exist, but I think it gets clearer once you listen to the whole thing, what he means by that. Because it's all about this raspiness kind of in his voice, and also all these different kind of characters he slips into during singing. You know, especially on this album, there's lots of witches kind of singing, lots of gnomy kind of singing, this really harsh and monster or creature-like sound. And then also really high and clean vocals like King Diamond and Judas Priest. And almost going into the power metal territory, but never without actually sounding musical, and I think that's even more important, always sounding almost theatrical. So there's a lot of drama to the voice, a lot of movement, and a lot of dynamics. And with this really aggressive kind of sound, really razor sharp, especially highs and high mids, we get all the nastiness, but also all the beauty of the voice. And yeah, enough talking about it. I want to show you in solo without effects.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth.
As you can hear, there's a lot, really lots of compression. And some would think that's way too much, but I think not, because this brings out all the little, again, all these nasty little things in the voice, especially on this lower part, you know, where he actually gets quieter if I even mute the processing. I hope he doesn't mind that I'm showing him like bare naked here. But you can hear when he gets lower in volume, it gets almost kind of, well, like a broken feeling.
In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling.
Yeah, back to the processing, especially on this part and the next, you can really listen that the compression is bringing up all the detail that is kind of lost in the recording or buried.
Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling. The head witch is calling.
Yeah, especially on this one, and also in the transition into the higher and stronger, more voluminous, whatever the word is, voluminous voice. Yeah, at least with more strong, more upfront kind of voice that is in this part. Let's have a listen in the mix and with effects.
In the hidden grove, Satan
this also brings me to the point that is like the negative effect of all this compression, because a lot of the dynamics get lost as well. And the process of automation, and you can see there's lots and lots of automation going on, from volume and delay, reverb, modulate, even more delay, and also some EQ. Some EQ and even some de-essing, which I will explain later. And this is there to restore the original dynamics without losing this detail that we won through this massive amount of compression. Let's have a look. Yeah, especially in this part that we had before. You can hear that at the end of the line, we needed the higher voice, the louder voice, to actually have more reverb and more delay on it. So it keeps the illusion of the singer singing in a church or in a church-like environment. Notice how once the stronger sung line comes up, I automate the short delay. I will show you which delay does what in a minute. And also smoothly bring in more reverb. And then at the end, where we want this strong reverb tail, I bring up the other delay effects.
Darkness is falling, the headwind is calling.
And this is there to smooth out the differences, to smooth out this contrast between the low and dry and kind of nasty voice, and transitioning into this higher and stronger and cleaner and also more melodic kind of voice.
In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling, the headwind is calling.
As you can see, this throughout the whole song, always this kind of dynamic going on. And I personally love this. I mean, it's a lot of work, but I personally don't care if it's worth it. And this is definitely worth it, especially when we move on to a later part, which I personally enjoyed the most, I think on the full album even, which is these kind of choirs, where we have 3 tracks. Also an interesting kind of approach, because with most singers, when you want to go for like a spacious and chorus kind of vibe, I tend to do that, but also most engineers and singers tend to do that. They bring up a lot more layers and lots of harmonies and stuff like that. But with this band, it's always, or almost always, about having the strong kind of prophet kind of voice that is centered as this. It has a bigger effect if you always have just one singer, one voice, and this changes throughout the song in its own dynamic, other than having all these layers coming in and out and well, kind of creating a fake kind of dynamic, which can also be nice, and I personally enjoy that more. But I realized that, especially with this kind of voice, a more unique approach would be to have a less is more kind of approach. And therefore, the parts where we actually have more layers, and even if it's just 2 more layers and not 8 or something like that, it really brings out the effect that these 2 layers opt to create. So enough talk, let's have a listen. Which does not sound that much different from the vocal in the verse or in the chorus even. But you have this really awesome, spacious feeling, like it's really getting lush and smooth, but at the same time not losing its integrity, which I personally really, really love about the full album. Okay, so I wanted to show you a few, well, odd things, like the ESSA kind of automation and also the high-end automation. Because with this kind of sound, and oh yeah, I wanted to show you the whole time the EQ. This is 30 dB. 30 dBs on a shelf at 8.5 kilohertz. With a small dip in the 3K, of course. And also, I don't want to lie, there's a low pass, which smooths out the curve. You can see it actually really, really well. Which is completely bonkers, completely nuts, especially when we look at the other EQs, where we have even more highs and lots of high mids and a bigger cut in the non-mids at 1K, which obviously brings out all the S's, all the harsh consonants, and makes it sometimes really annoying. And here comes VDSer, because, well, here's VDSer, I think, only on the delay, because I built a delay, so I could actually decide what should be repeated in this echo. But sometimes we have some parts that we actually need to smooth out. So I'm going to show you that we needed some high-end attenuation on the echo, on the delay. Okay, because this line is high-end attenuation. So here's just the echo pushed into the background, but here we can actually have a look, have a listen at a part without the de-esser would be, that without the de-esser would be too harsh. Again, it's about the smoothness with the doubles. And now with the de-esser, or not the de-esser, with the high-end attenuation, which is just smooth on this one note to make it really nice and sit well within the mix. And then we have the full harshness, the full range on this on the phrase afterwards. And this happens quite a lot through the whole thing. There's the lead guitar, and we somehow need to manage this balance of the lead guitar. I think there's EQ on the lead. Actually, no automation on the lead guitar there, but I think I can promise you there's automation on the vocal. Yeah, it's almost sounding the same, almost. And this little gap here actually helps us to retain the illusion it's sounding the same, even though we have a heavy cut in the highs and the high mids for the vocals, so the lead can cut through. And I noticed there's also a small panning automation to the right side, while the leads, Max's leads are always panned a little bit to the left because he's the player on the left side here. So we get a better distinguished kind of sound field, and a little bit of spaciousness as well. EQ in, and high. Yeah, it's almost sounding the same, so let's have a listen in solo. Yeah, I think the picture becomes clear. And as a last kind of thing that I wanted to talk about is the effects. So let's move into the mixer so we can have a listen to each individual effect. I do have a kind of a conglomerate of effects here, which is 5 effects consisting of 3 delays, 1 reverb, and yeah, well, a mixture of reverb, delay, and also pitch shifting. Some small phasing effect coming from a small pitch shifting effect, and also having a little phasing effect, a real phasing effect from, well, stereo widening. But let's have a listen to each and every effect in solo. Let's move back again so I can make a loop. Yeah, loop of the verse and chorus maybe. So no effects. And here's the first effect, which I call the thickening delay. It makes the vocal, well, not really stereo, but a little wider, a little bit smoother as well. See, it's a mono delay.
In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling, the headwind is...
It's really fast, 8 notes, and you can't really hear it in the mix. No? It's just for effect, just for a cue even, having a little low mid bump. Then the reverb, and you can see each delay goes into the reverb as well.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth.
And the reverb is really big, really long, and has lots of pre-delay, so it gets this feeling we're in a church and there's really lots of room, lots of space until we can hear the first reflections. And this is what gives the vocal the most unique kind of sound, with the spacious flavor and this kind of unique and airy kind of feel in the mix. Yeah, and then the next most important effect, I would think, is this weak, I call it quad, because, well, it's not really correct nowadays because I only have this kind of thing here and there's only a stereo channel, so it's a duo kind of thing. In detuning the original vocal just by 1 and 2 cents. But this gives it really this nice stereo kind of effect without smothering the full mix. You know, because sometimes if you have this kind of double tracking vibe or ADR kind of vibe, vocals tend to lose focus. And that's, of course, something that we actually don't want on this record.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling.
Also, let's mute the effects coming from the effect.
Sparks their lust inside.
And you can really hear that it's getting wider and at the same time a little bit smeared. So it's not so focused, not so direct. Even though we want a direct sound, this is just to make it gel into the mix. Let's have a listen with all 3 effects right now. And without. Without the effects, it's almost too dry, too upfront, and also has this ear-piercing kind of content. And with the phasing, especially from the first delay and this quad effect, we actually smooth out the high-end curve a little bit. And then the next 2 delays, I like to call the effect delays, but especially the first, which is a quarter note delay, is very important for the full mix and overall sound of the vocal.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth.
Yeah. I'll show you the other delay, which is just a half note delay. First.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden
and the 2 together.
Grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling, the headwind is calling.
which especially on harmony, on melodies, we create harmonies through the different delays. You could listen, you could hear that there's almost like this kind of stair effect, jumping down and jumping back in time. So the notes of the singer, the actual melody he sings, overlaps within itself and creates a harmony. And again, in the full mix, it's not that obvious, not that loud, except for the parts, you could also already hear it, for the parts which we automated up, so we can actually hear the delay as an effect.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness.
Now, as you can hear, right now, the delay is there, but it's just like a small delay trail. You know, leaving this impression there's lots of space and lots of echo around him, just as it is in a church. And now, all 5 effects, first in solo, then in the mix.
Blazing fires light up the night sky. In the hidden grove, Satan summoned forth. Darkness is falling, the headwind is calling. The Lord of Light lost their lust inside. Join this infernal night. The 7 seals are packed. Cast your spells. Open the gates of hell again and sacrifice some spirits blood tonight. Cast your spells.
Yeah. Also, there's this really nice, outro part to the chorus, where we have the transition into the riff again, where we have lots of automation, these little delay throws that really create a sense of depth and bigness. As you can see, happens throughout the whole song. Not going into that much detail now, because I think we've reached the end of the video. Yeah, that was all that I wanted to talk about for this production. I hope you've learned something from it. I definitely learned something from myself doing this, because it's been quite a while since we produced the album, and now that it's time to release, revisiting old mixes is almost always helping me to realize what we did and also why we did it, and then I can actually take it to the next production and rethink what actually needs to be done, what could be used again, and what doesn't or does fit with the new production at another band. Because the most important thing I think I learned in this production was the heavy automation on the vocals. I mean, not the effects, that's something I always do, and that I actually did quite a lot less on this production than I would normally or usually do. But I mean on the EQ and in regards to the lead guitar. Again, in this song, not so much, because there's only the intro lead without vocals and then there's only solos. But if you listen to the full album, there's lots of lead parts, there's lots of small melodies played by the lead guitar, and almost always it's underneath the vocal or in conjunction with the vocal. So there's this give and take between the vocal and the lead guitar, and to make it really, really work, there's lots of automation on the EQ to make little gaps in the lead guitar so the vocal fits in, or even, as we had here, make a gap in the lead vocal to make the lead guitar stand out more and create a sense of space, even with lead guitar and lead vocal in conjunction. Thank you for watching. This was Darkest Rites from Attic's upcoming album Return of the Witchfinder, and I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough of the whole mix and the production overall.